Welcome to Bets of the North, live from New Orleans. I'm Doug Lesmerises. He's Tyler Shoemaker. Thanks for joining us. T-Shoe, good to see you.
Good to see you. I am not live from New Orleans. I am live from a house that I'm about to get under contract. Fingers crossed. As our listeners know, I've been trying to sell this house for 3 months now. So it's an exciting day here in Greenville.
It really is exciting. And because you're just going to take, I think this is what you do when you sell a house. Because you're going to buy another house, right?
Yeah.
But there's
house shopping this afternoon.
There's that brief moment where you've sold your house and you haven't bought the other house yet, and you just take that to the book. You just take that to the sports book, try to double, then you can get two houses.
I tried to float that. Yeah, I tried to float that to my wife. She was not as receptive. She is a big TSI proponent, but I guess I understand. Whatever.
Yeah. That's too many vibes. Trying to win two houses instead of just taking one house. That's the vibe.
Let's just use Doug's best bets to fund our next mortgage.
Yeah. The all orange mortgage brought to you by Syracuse, Miami, and Texas. All right. We're going to run through the 4 quarterfinals and give our favorite bet for each game. We each went 2-2 when we did this in the first round, but I will say this. We nailed Ohio State, Tennessee, and we nailed Penn State, SMU. We had a third quarter bet and an over and a first quarter. Like everything was great. We missed. You and I agreed on Clemson, Texas. Our best bet for that, for both of us, was Clemson plus 12. And there was a moment there when Clemson came back when we were feeling pretty good about that.
Yeah, that's one of those where you lose, you tip your cap to Texas. They had the goal line stand late in the game, but that was one play away from Clemson, threatening to win the game, and instead they didn't even cover the 12. So it's it was a loser, obviously, but that's one you can feel good about for what that's worth.
Yeah, so we're in the right range on that. And then Indiana, Notre Dame, we both got wrong. I think you took the over for the total on that, and Notre Dame just kind of stormed out and then sat on it a little bit. And I went with the first quarter over that did not work out. There was
Indiana. I don't think Indiana did not show up the way either of us thought they would.
Yes.
Notre Dame scored some points, but Indiana just didn't, until late, obviously, when the game was already pretty much over. But Indiana did not come out of the gates kind of how we thought, because I think we both kind of thought that game may be tight back and forth for a quarter or two, and then Notre Dame would pull away, and Notre Dame just kind of stepped on their throat from the get-go and then let off the gas there at the end for Indiana to make it look respectable.
Yeah. So these are not our real money bets. If you've been following us during the course of the year, we started with a $5,000 bankroll. We ended up with $5,049. We didn't want to go under. So these are just suggestions. We're putting thought into it. We're putting math and vibes into it. I am vibed up here in New Orleans. So we're just not betting hungry people's money because we want to at least give them more than $5,000. So we're going to go through each game. We'll start with the Friday night, the Tuesday night game. Feels like Friday.
Yep.
Penn State, Boise State. And I am intrigued that you like the Broncos here. Penn State's favored by 11, and your best bet is taking those points with Boise. Give me some math on this, T-Shoe.
And this is all math because my gut, the vibes, I think, favor Penn State here. They played really well against Oregon in the Big Ten championship, and then they just destroyed SMU in the first round. So Penn State is kind of on a heater right now. So this makes me a little nervous from a vibe standpoint, but the math, my official TSI projection on this game is Penn State minus 4.5.
Wow.
I've been toying around, as I do, with some different formulas, different numbers. And when I ran those last night, I tweeted this out. I make it Penn State minus 6. So nothing I do math wise, and that's opponent adjusted. Obviously, is everything I do. I cannot get above 10 here, so I will take the 11.5 nervously with Boise State here.
Yeah, it's been 11 and 11.5 or so. It's moving a little bit. We got this at minus 112 for you to get 11.5 points here. Bill and I talked about this on the Monday KOTN. I am wary of the blitz. I am wary of it potentially being a little similar to SMU Penn State, but also if Maddox Madsen doesn't throw it to Penn State 3 times the way Kevin Jennings did, then that game won't go that way. Do you think that game just got away from SMU and that was at home? But do you think that game has affected this line? Is that why maybe it's higher than your math numbers show you because the vibes off Penn State are so good? And it certainly could be the case that was more about SMU on the road in a spot getting blitzed than it was about Penn State. And the result is you're getting an extra 3 or 4 points here.
I definitely think so. And this is something that I've kind of noticed in both football and basketball. Like when you get to March Madness, I feel like the last game has everything to do with what the next line is going to be. I don't want to say everything. It has a lot to do with what the line ends up being. Whereas I think if this was, a week 11 game or something, I think it is probably under 10 points, but because of what Penn State's done lately. And I mean, and rightfully so, you do have to obviously take those recent games into account and, even argue, take those into more account. But that secondary formula that I mentioned, I did take each team's last 3 games and weigh those even more heavily than I normally would. And I still, that's why it takes it from 4.5 to 6, but it's not, again, it's not 14. So, I'm going to roll with the math here, even though Penn State is on a heater.
Does sometimes the math just is making the decision for you? I mean, obviously you lean on math all the time, but then you do sometimes if math and vibes match up, then you feel especially good about that. You're indicating here, you're not sure about the vibes, but the math is demanding it. And is that when the math demands it this hard, do you feel good about that? It's like, hey, my vibes are probably wrong then. I've got to lean on the math and be getting an extra 4 points or 5 points here compared to the number. Do you feel good about this because the math is so heavy?
Yeah. And it's one of those things where if I just relied on my vibes, because I don't know ball, as plenty of my Twitter trolls have pointed out, I don't know ball, but I know math. So if I just relied on my vibes and what I think about teams all the time, I would not be a winning bettor. But I tweeted out yesterday, I'm up 18 units on all my plays I gave out this year. And that's again relying 95% on math. So in a situation like this, where I just looking at the game, I would think man, Penn State's going to kill Boise. That was my son and I were talking about it. He was like, Penn State's going to kill Boise. I'm like, all right, well then my bet is confirmed, because if that's the consensus opinion and the math tells me something so drastically different, that makes me feel good about a bet, for better or worse.
I would imagine there are people watching this and listening to this who agree with that, who just think Penn State's going to kill Boise. Would you really advise? I mean, of course, this is your bet, but how strongly would you advise? Hold your nose. The math is really telling you something here. And you kind of could end up being right. Penn State could absolutely be the better team and win by 9, right? Is this a hold your nose, take these points suggestion from T-Shoe?
Yeah, I actually gave this out on my college football guide as one of my 2 official bets for the playoffs so far. Okay. This was one of them. So I do, again, vibes be damned. The math really likes it. And again, because I've had some extra time here to really play with the numbers, I have tried to be all right, if I, tweak this or whatever, I cannot get that high. So if it loses, it loses. But I tried my best to disprove my initial number on this, and I can't do it.
Okay. All right. So my bet for here is in a number at a little certain spot. I'm giving a lot of juice here, but I like Penn State third quarter -2.5. So that it's under a field goal. I feel great about it. It's -124, which is not great. But my idea here is either Penn State is rolling and comes out of halftime. They're not going to be taking their foot off the gas in the third quarter. So they're either rolling and doing their thing, or Boise's in this thing. Maybe Boise's even winning, but you go in and make halftime adjustments to oh my God, Ashton Jeanty is a monster, and Penn State comes out with a better game plan than they had. Or, hey, we're down 10, Andy Koltelnicki, you better come up with something. So I just it's my multiple paths idea. I can have the game totally wrong and maybe get this right, because I could see Penn State losing and coming out and winning the third quarter. I could see Penn State winning at halftime and coming out and winning the third quarter. And if I'm only given 2.5, I really like this bet.
Yeah, I can't fault you at all. And this is one of those, we've done this in the past where you kind of get on a roll with a certain angle on a certain team and you just ride it, and you were all over it in the first round. So I don't blame you at all for going back to this. And like you said, the game very well could end up, as my numbers project, but that doesn't mean Penn State's not going to own the third quarter, as I think they very well may. So I don't blame you at all for that.
All right, let's get to this next game because we got more T-shoe math here, baby. Arizona State against Texas. This is around 12.5 or 13. This is the early game on New Year's Day. You also like the underdog here. You are taking Arizona State with the points, plus 12.5 at minus 110. Again, at various times, at various places, it's been 12.5 or 13. Why do your numbers like this so much?
So this is one where my official projection is right at what I took it at 12.5. So you might be like, well, then, like, what are you doing? But again, as I've toyed around with these numbers and weighing, the main thing that I was looking at was like, okay, if I really weigh these last few games, that's like, rivalry week, conference championship week, like higher stakes games to give me a better idea of maybe how these teams are going to show up. When I did that, I projected Arizona State to win the game by 2 points. So, in good conscience, I can't say I think they're going to win the game because, Texas has been a better team all year, I think. And I think most people would agree with that. But if I got a formula tell me they're going to win the game and I can get them plus 12.5, like I got to do it.
Yeah. Okay. No, that makes sense. And this is math is telling you this. And I think I like this even. Well, it's just so similar. It really is so similar. It's like two good defenses against two awesome running backs. And then how do you break that down? Yeah. I do think Arizona State probably has a better depth of talent than Boise. I think I maybe like this. I think there's less of a chance of a blitzing here by Texas than I think it could be by Penn State. But again, this might be a little bit of a hold your nose and make this bet, even if you're kind of feeling like, I don't know if Arizona State can hang. Scatterboo and Genty just make this it's so I don't know how math accounts for it, but it is odd, T-Shoe, when these are the two guys who are the most propulsive players in the playoff. They've driven these two teams this far. And I think you could make the argument that they're the two best players in these individual games, but the other teams have a greater depth of talent. Math doesn't know that, but it's kind of weird. It's like it's so how these two games are so similar and they're both kind of weird.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, the math obviously can't account for like the matchup necessarily as far as that goes, but what the math does see is that Arizona State beat the crap out of Kansas State and whoever else they played recently. So it's like, how do you, again, opponent adjusting those numbers compared to what Texas has done, and Texas has just been kind of like Jekyll and Hyde, I think, throughout the year. Like I think they're one of the three most talented teams, in the country for sure. But it's like, we talked about Quinn Ewers, like what version of him is going to show up? Like there are questions with Texas. Like, I don't think they're like a super team. And I think Arizona State is just one of those teams that's just like getting red hot at the right time. So I think it's an interesting battle of like red hot at the right time versus like a team that's clearly more talented top to bottom.
Would you encourage a money line sprinkle on this for folks?
Yeah, I might,
nothing
crazy, but I may throw like $10 on it or something, because I don't even know what the money line is.
Plus
probably
380.
I was going to say 3 or 4 to 1. Yeah, I think that's worth a little sprinkle. Even if you don't like the spread because it's not on a key number of like 14 or something, like sure, throw some fun money. Don't put a whole unit on it certainly, but I'll probably do that.
Arizona State's plus 380 on the money line. Boise State's plus 360 on the money line as I look at it. All right. So this is the one that I did the most research on. My bet is Arizona State second quarter plus 3.5. Arizona State in second quarters this year is 9-1-3. So they outscored opponents 9 times. They were outscored once and they tied 3 times. On teamrankings.com, you can sort by how much you score in each quarter. Texas actually is 5th in the nation in second quarter scoring at 12.3 points per game, but Arizona State is 8th at 12 points per game. So they both score a lot in the second quarter, but also like my vibes theory of this is, as opposed to maybe like a script where Arizona State comes out and marches right down the field. I think maybe it's a little bit more of like they're stuck in the mud a little bit, and then they've got to sort of figure out how to get Cam Scattaboo loose, and it takes a couple drives. And I also could see even like a situation where maybe like Texas jumps out 13-0, right? But then is Arizona State going to get boat race, or are they going to compete? And then all of a sudden, here we are, and it's 13-0 at the end of the first quarter, and then at halftime, it's 20-7, and you've won your bet on Arizona State. So I just like I kind of like the vibes of this, even though Texas also is a good second quarter team.
I can't tell you how happy it makes my heart that you're using teamrankings.com and using math in this analysis. That is just heartwarming for me. I proud dad moment here. As you were talking, I pulled up team rankings because another feature that I like, that I personally use on team rankings, is you can look at what they've done on the year, but you can also look what they've done their last 3 games, which is like I mentioned earlier. So looking at what these teams have done in their last 3 games in the second quarter, Texas 11.3 points, which is a point worse than their season number. Arizona State 16.3 points in the second quarter, which is almost 4.5 points more than their season average. So just to throw some gasoline on what you just said, you were cooking there. So throw some gas on that. I really like that.
I like it.
I'm gonna take this with you.
Yeah, Arizona State has had a couple second quarters too where they've won the second quarter 14-0. They've won the second quarter, 10-3. Like they've really, and so to be getting more than a field goal here at almost even money, I really like a lot of parts of this. Because again, I like a tissue of this is Doug's hedge of like, I don't know. I think maybe I don't know about the 12.5, but I like in the moment. I can see a moment where Arizona State competes. I'm a little less sure about overall the game, but I like their spot here. All right, next one is Oregon, Ohio State. This is a popular game that people are excited about. This line, it's about 2.5 points for Ohio State. Just what's your read on this game, first of all, overall? Because your bet on this game, right, is not a straight up, like, what do you think is happening? It's like, what would you, if somebody wanted to bet this game, what do you think of the number? Who should be favored by the TSI index?
Yeah, I'm right at the market. I'm like Ohio State -2 would be my number on this game. So right there. It opened 1.5. Ohio State -1.5, got bet up to 2.5. I would be surprised if you see a 3. If you see a 3, I would take it, because that probably means Ohio State is. That's just how the market goes. Like if books get more comfortable taking an Ohio State -3 than they are taking Oregon +3, then that tells you something, I think. So the fact that it's been sitting at 2.5 is not all that surprising, because I don't think the books. I mean, this is essentially a coin flip. I think we know that. I don't think books want to take +3 on Oregon either. So I'm right at the number. I don't have a play on the side. I mean, if you just want to get involved, like I think Ohio State money line probably would be the way to go. I've always said in any sport, I'm formerly a basketball player, so primarily from that standpoint, but even in football, I feel like when you have to play a team a second time in a season, I've always felt like the team that lost the first round has the advantage in the second round, because it's like, okay, now we've seen what they can do to beat us. We get to make the adjustments, and they just have to guess what we're going to do. And maybe that's flawed. I don't know, but I've always just kind of had that vibe around rematches. So I think the rematch aspect favors Ohio State. And as we saw against Tennessee, like if that's the version of Ohio State that shows up, I don't know that any team in the country can beat them.
So just looking at DraftKings as an example, you could get Ohio State -2.5 at -108, or you could get Ohio State on the money line at -130. When it's a small number like this, I mean, this would be a frustrating thing for Ohio State fans, like to bet Ohio State, then Ohio State wins by 2. Like, -108 versus -130 on the money line. Do you have a strong push either way for people who want to bet Ohio State?
Yeah, I'd have to run the numbers, but off the top of my head, I think taking the money line. I mean, we already saw this. This was a 1-point game the first time around. So again, these teams are so even that I think in this situation, it does warrant taking the money line versus laying the 2.5.
Okay. So then your bet for this game is on the total, and you were dancing around with the Oregon team total, and the line moved a little bit on you. But at this point, you like under 55.5 at -110. Why?
Yeah, I know this is contradictory to what I said on our last show about playoff games being more high scoring and all of that. But when the number is so far off, so I project 48.5 for this total. So a full touchdown below what it's at. I think it opened at 52 or 53. So we have seen the number come up, but what I really like is that it's now above a key number of 55. I was hoping to get 56, but I'll take 55.5. Again, my official projection, 48.5. When I ran my, secondary formula here, it came to 52. So a little higher, weighing those recent games. And that's, a lot to do with Oregon getting in a crazy shootout with Penn State and Ohio State hanging a pretty big number on Tennessee. So that obviously factors in. So even accounting for all that, I'm still a full field goal under this number. And I also think the first game was so high scoring.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. 63 on the total there.
Yeah. Again, this is just one of those, I don't know how to explain it. I've just seen betting enough that when you have that type of situation, I think a lot of people are just going to bet based on the first game had 60 some points. Why wouldn't I bet the over here? I think those teams are going to regress back to what they actually are, especially defensively and especially on the Ohio State side. I mean, you look at Ohio State's points allowed, in each individual game, and you just run down the list, and it's like, oh, well, what number sticks out? The 30 that they gave up as opposed to giving up. I mean, they ended up giving up 17 to Tennessee, but I think everyone knows that was kind of a fake 17. So I think especially on the Ohio State defense side, I think you're going to see Oregon score significantly less than 31 or 32 that they scored the first time around. So that's where I wanted to go, was Oregon team total. I would have loved to get it at 27 or better, but given that it's now 26.5, I'll take the game under at 55.5.
Okay. Jordan Birch playing for Oregon on defense, big deal. Ohio State defensive adjustments since the Oregon game. If they don't get burned deep the way Evan Stewart did and give up some easy points like that, you lower the score. Mine, though, you can tell me if this is contradictory. My bet here is the Ohio State team total over 28.5. And again, I'd love it if it's 28, but 30-24 Ohio State and we both win. What do you think of this team total for the Buckeyes that I'm taking at -108?
I think that number is really about right, honestly. Let's see, looking at, so my projected score would be what,
right on it, kind of, right?
Yeah. I mean, basically right on it. So I think that number is about right. But again, you look at what the Ohio State offense is doing here lately. You look at, the Oregon defense, what they did, or what they allowed versus Penn State, a Penn State offense that Ohio State kind of shut down for the most part. In their matchup with them. So if you want to look at it from that angle, I think that could make sense. I'm with you though. I think if you could get a 28, I think that would be much more preferable to the 28.5. But again, we're beholden to what the line is at the time we do this. So I don't hate it. It would make me a little nervous because I think Ohio State's going to be right around that 28. So it's like, do they muster another field goal or something in there to push that over for you?
So let me ask you. So on DraftKings, you can kind of pick the total that you want, and then you're just given the juice. 28 Ohio State over 28.5 at -108, or Ohio State over 27.5 at -135. It's kind of a big jump.
I don't think I would do that.
Okay. So just hope that if you're going to bet this, that you're thinking more like the Buckeyes get the 30 or 31, that they're not sitting right on 28.
Well, because I think, obviously I'm on the under here, but I think if this game does go over, I don't think it's going to hit at 56. I think it's either going to go under like I'm projecting, or it's going to be one of these crazy playoff games like we've seen that's just in the mid 30s a piece. So I wouldn't lay that much juice to get 27.5.
Okay. Last one then. Georgia, Notre Dame. You are the king of riding with the Fighting Irish. You've been telling people this week that you started the season with a Notre Dame win over Texas A&M, and then you hit it again with Like you've just been all about the Irish, so you're picking Georgia. No, you're not picking Georgia. Can you imagine? Would you go against yourself there if your numbers suddenly somehow flipped? You couldn't let yourself bet Georgia here after riding the Irish all year.
I think the Notre Dame fan base that I've built up on Twitter might have an issue with that. I think I've got them also like cautiously optimistic now. Like my buddy Tim Murray at VSiN's a big Notre Dame fan, and he's like just win. He's like, I appreciate the support, but we got to just win. He's locked in. So no, I am not on Georgia here. I am on Notre Dame on the money line. I project them -5. Again, looking at my secondary formula here, I got a -3. To me, this line is all perception, but eventually, like we've already seen this tick down. Georgia was like a 1.5, I think maybe even 2.5 point favorite at one point. This is now down to 1.
Yep.
I won't be surprised if by kickoff Notre Dame is like a 1.5 point favorite.
Okay.
Which again, it's still light compared to my numbers, but Notre Dame deserves to be favored. The only reason Notre Dame would not be favored is just because people see Georgia on the jersey. I mean, there's nothing in the numbers or in the performance, again, outside of the NIU game, that would indicate that Notre Dame is not better than Georgia this year. So I'll take this money line at -105.
Okay. I agree with. I mean, I'm not picking frickin' Georgia. I mean, of course I agree with this. Like, I'm like, what am I doing here? Landis, when we were doing outrageous predictions a couple weeks ago for the playoff, Landis's outrageous prediction was Notre Dame shuts out Georgia in round 2. So I don't know if he's still there now. We'll make our picks on Tuesdays mornings, KOTN for this game. But my bet here is the Georgia team total under 22.5 at -106. Backup quarterback, good Notre Dame defense. I'm not even sure Kirby Smart wants to score more than 22 points in this game. I think Georgia's formula to win is 17-14. So I actually feel quite good about this. What do you think about this bet for me?
So this was hard. And the reason because my numbers are pretty heavy on the over for this game, but the reason I didn't go that route is because like we've only seen what Gunnar Stockton played like a half in the SEC championship. So there's just not enough of a mass sample size from that standpoint. So that's why I was more comfortable to go with Notre Dame money line, because if anything, it's going to make Georgia worse. So that's not going to affect my Notre Dame stance on the money line. But as far as the total goes, we just don't have enough data. It's like, are they going to play faster with him? Like, are they going to? I don't know how they're going to play stylistically with him versus with Carson Beck. And Carson Beck throws a lot of picks, so like that also creates potential for defensive scores. I don't know what Gunnar Stockton's propensity for that sort of thing is. So I don't hate it. And if Gunnar Stockton is a substantial downgrade from Carson Beck, which I think is fair to assume because Carson Beck has looked pretty bad at times this year and they didn't bench him. So, you can look at that as like, okay, well, they're just confident in their guy. Or you could look at it like, well, they know what's behind him and they'll just roll with Carson Beck. So I don't hate it. I do have Notre Dame defense ranked really high. I think I've got them in the top 3. So I don't hate it at all. And you're getting above 21 here. So, key numbers matter. I don't hate it. I would just be nervous because I just don't know stylistically what they're going to look like.
So just trying to maximize a bet here. Again, on DraftKings, you can kind of pick your number in a lot of ways. Theory of the case, if I'm riding with Landis and thinking like Georgia's going to do nothing in this game, you could go as low as under 18.5 for Georgia at +165. Now, +165 is quite a bit different than -106. It's only a 4-point difference. And if you're really thinking like, I think they're scoring, I'm not sure they're going to get in the end zone kind of stuff. Like, is +165 enough to say, you know what, put a little bit of your money on that as maybe as well as this?
Yeah, I was going to say, because it's like such an imprecise exercise, because again, the sample size with Gunnar Stockton is so small, I would go to extremes like that. I think this is where you could take those alt lines and, you could look at the alt line. I don't know what they are, like on Notre Dame on the spread. If you're riding with us and Notre Dame here and you kind of are on the same lines, it's like, okay, Georgia's not going to be able to do much. Notre Dame's been the better team. Like maybe you look at a Notre Dame alt line, get some plus money, and because clip this out when Georgia wins, but I think it's more likely Notre Dame beats the crap out of Georgia than it is that Georgia wins the game.
Yeah, I agree with that. You could get Notre Dame minus 6.5 at plus 179.
Yeah, I would do that.
You could get Notre Dame minus 9.5 at plus 245. Which minus 9.5, that feels like that's 20-10, which is not like a thumping. Which actually, like that might be my score pick, like something like that. I think 2 scores, low scoring is kind of where I probably am going to land on this. So I think I'm going to hit some alt lines on this game, both on the spread and on some totals.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go here. Again, nothing about the vibes or the math tell me that Georgia's the better team. So I definitely think it's more likely Notre Dame wins convincingly than it is that Georgia wins, period. Yeah.
And if I'm going to be wrong a multitude of ways and with big swings, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. That's what we do here.
Yeah. We would lose big. Okay. He's T-Shoe. We love having him on Bets of the North. We'll be back, I think, for one more before this is all said and done. And maybe you'll be living somewhere new by that time.
Hopefully. We'll see.
Yeah.
TBD.
Yeah. All right. Thanks to our producer, Mike Rostowski, as always, for making us look good and sound good. Make sure you're catching Kings of the North all this week. We're going to be doing 3 different shows on Tuesday and then another one on Wednesday night, another one Thursday afternoon. But Bets of the North is a huge part of what we do. We're grateful that T-Shoe is part of our family here at Kings of the North. So for now, he is Tyler Shoemaker. I'm Doug Lesmerises. And that was Bets of the North on Kings of the North.